Welcome back everybody. Now this episode is all about towing mirrors and I want to lay it all out in a nice simple way for everything you need to know if you're towing a caravan or camper trailer, from all the mirror options you've got out there to the regulations you need to stick by. And in particular, I've got these brand new Snap Zap mirrors from KSource that actually retrofit onto the standard mirrors of the Next Gen Ranger. And there's been a little bit of controversy on whether or not these are compliant if you're towing a full-size caravan. And now to test all this out, we're actually going to go somewhere where I can measure it all out and I can do some physical examples to show you what you should be looking at. We're going to run through all the different mirror types out there, the pros and cons, from the clip-on mirrors such as our Milenco Grand Aeros we've been running for a number of years, to some of the new retrofits you can do, to the full bolt-on mirrors. And I think people will be really interested with the results because we'll be able to physically compare at least these two mirrors with all the different vision guidelines that you need to adhere to. And I'll run through some tips and tricks in regards to everything involved with these mirrors, what to look out for, and what you need to do if you're towing a camper trailer, a medium-sized caravan like this, or even a large one. So let's go for a little drive. I've got a few locations nearby where I think I can get all this to work, because in this episode, come along as we show you how. So let's firstly go through why you need towing mirrors and where it really comes into effect. Well, the general rule of thumb is if the vehicle that you are towing with is narrower than what you are towing, then yes, you will need towing mirrors. Now, where it gets a little bit grey is where, say if you're towing a camper trailer, such as our Jayco Swan, it measures 2150 from side to side. So that is extremities of the body from the outside, from one side to the other. Our Ranger, if we measure from mirror tip to mirror tip, it is 2200. So technically, we're 50 mil wider than the camp trailer we're towing. Now, if you got pulled over, I still think they would say you need to have towing mirrors. And this is where I'm really surprised. We do a lot of trips up and down the coast, whether or not we're towing or just driving to Brisbane and back and all over the place. And the amount of vehicles I see towing full or medium-sized pop tops, such as what we've got here, they don't have any mirrors at all. And I think the perception is if you've got a larger vehicle, you don't need to have them. But the rules are pretty straightforward, and that's what we want to go through as part of this first section of the video. Then we'll get into all the different types, and I do really want to test out those Snap Zap mirrors because they're going to be great to actually just quickly pop on rather than having to screw everything on. They look a little bit more integrated. I just think it's going to be a bit easier. The video isn't about that, but buying them actually triggered this video because I started getting into what is actually compliant and non-compliant. And compliant is where you need to be. So let's go through the rest of the rules and I'll show you what you really need to be looking at. Now, the easiest thing to do is actually stand at the rear of your caravan or camp trailer and look straight down the outside. And you should be able to see your mirrors sitting on the outside if you're going to be compliant. If you look down and you can't see your mirrors, then obviously you're going to need towing mirrors. So here you can see we've got our Milencos on and you can see that they're hanging out. But this side here is going to be the easier side to get the compliance on. If we go over to the other side, you actually need to take into account the protrusion of your awning as well. So this applies to heavy vehicles, trucks, buses, all that sort of thing. You need to account for anything that's hanging on the side of what you're towing. So in the case of caravans, we've got our awnings. So you're not measuring just from the body. So from one side of the body to the other, we need to account for the arms for our rollout awnings as well. And I think that's where it's a little bit interesting because if I now look down the side of the Ranger, I actually need to straighten it up a little bit, to be honest. I can't see the mirror at all. So this actually makes a fairly big difference because this comes out probably an extra 40 to 50 millimeters than what we didn't have on the other side. So on the left-hand side or the passenger side, you're going to be a little bit more biased in regards to what is hanging out. It's a little bit complicated, but hopefully that simplifies it down. So the overall width that we have for our journey will be calculated from this arm all the way through to this side of the body. And in my case, I measured that at home as being around about 2400. The body itself is 2330, so you do have that bit of an overhang with the arms that come out from the awning. Now on our tow vehicle, you want to get a tape measure, like what you would do with your caravan or camper trailer, and you want to measure from your wingtip to your wingtip. So it's just a case of passing the tape measure through, measuring that, and that will give you your overall width that determines whether or not you need to have towing mirrors in accordance with what you're towing. So in the case of the Ranger, it is pretty much 2200 from tip to tip of the mirror itself. And that is where Snap and Zap has come in, because they're actually adding on the 150mm, which should technically make it compliant with towing this particular caravan, or generally most full-size caravans. However, it's going to be extremely tight because there's a lot of discussion on whether or not the extension of the mirror needs to be protruding that full 150mm out from the caravan. Now, in all the hunting around I've done in regards to the regulation, it doesn't actually say that. It actually says the mirror protrusion needs to be wider than the caravan you're towing. But there's a whole heap of other vision requirements that we need to tick off in regards to any mirrors we're putting on. Now, I know the Milencos, they're going to be fine because we can extend them out. So we'll get into that as part of all the different options, but that's a definite pro for the Milencos as opposed to a fixed mirror that you can't extend out to account for the width of whatever you're towing. Particularly if you're towing a number of different things and the width gets wider and narrower, you've got no flexibility in being able to change that. But I'm getting off the track a little bit, which I have a habit to do. Let's go back through the rest of the guidelines and I'll show you how to work it out so that you're 100% compliant. I've never done this before, so I think it's actually going to be really, really interesting. Now, I've also heard people say, oh, I've got a camera on the back of my van, it's connected up to my vehicle. I use that over tow mirrors. I'm pretty sure in every state that is illegal. You still need to have those mirrors on as a legal requirement because it relates back to the Australian design rule. It's a great idea to have these enabled and activated so you can actually see what's in behind you. So if you need to pull out, you can quickly have a look at that. Make sure no one's in behind you, sort of tucked in right tight behind the caravan, which I do see happen quite a lot. That way you can safely overtake, merge back in. You can even check via this if you want to make sure that you've got enough distance if you're not really sure where the rear of your van is, if you're new to towing or something like that. But you can't 100% legally rely on this camera. I just thought I'd add that into the video. If you do entirely intend on relying on your rear view camera on the back of your caravan, if they see that, they see you don't have mirrors and they pull you over, they do their checks, they'll probably give you a fine. Now, the one thing to be mindful of with any of these mirrors that are clip on is that if you're not towing a caravan or anything, you've parked up your caravan park and you're driving down a public road, you need to pull these off because you're actually then being illegal driving down the road because these extend out too far. Now, the legal requirement is that you shouldn't have anything protruding from the side of your vehicle more than 150mm, or in the case of folding mirrors, you can go up to 220 or 230mm. So these might just fit in, I think, but really, in any case, if you're not actually towing down the road, you should remove these mirrors. So if you're out sightseeing, out and about, you always see people driving around with these mirrors clipped on. You should pull them off because you can be pulled over and booked for having them on. That's just a handy little tip and trick that a lot of people aren't aware of. So while you think you're doing the right thing by leaving them on, you do actually need to pull them off if you're not towing. But where is all this taking us? Well, if you Google, do I need towing mirrors? You'll see a number of little diagrams pop up, and they're all based around an Australian design rule. Particularly if you're in Australia. If you're in another country, it's going to apply to whatever design rules you have in those particular countries. Now in Australia, it's ADR or Australian Design Rule 14/02. And in 2006, there was an amendment made that came up with this diagram that you see right here. Now, this is Amendment 1 that came out in 2006, and that clarified all the vision requirements you need to have with a vehicle when you're towing a caravan. It's really quite simple. You essentially just have a 20-meter rule that runs from the mirrors. Actually, I'm just going to make a quick clarification here, just because I want the video to be correct. The 20-meter rule actually goes from your eyes or your ocular level. So you actually measure from your eye level where you're going to be sitting inside the vehicle, not from the rear of the mirrors. It won't make too much difference in regards to the experiments we're doing in this video, but I just thought I'd clarify that for anyone that might pick that up. You can clearly see it in the diagrams, but that's pretty much it. So where you're looking at in the vehicle, looking back, so the back face of the mirror itself, all the way through 20 meters past the back of the caravan, trailer, or whatever you're towing. And you'll see that it projects out 4 meters on either side of the caravan or camper trailer. Now on the driver's side, it's actually really easy. It just comes out that straight 4 meters. But if we bring the diagram back up, you'll notice that there's a few different colors that refer to blind spots. Now the actual ADR doesn't necessarily have them in this configuration. However, a lot of publications have actually simplified and clarified that with these different colorings on here. So we're going to run through that firstly on the driver's side. And to do that, my plan is to plot that diagram out on the ground here so we can visually see and test the different mirrors to see where we sit. So to do that, I've got some witches hats that I got from Bunnings. I've got my long measuring tape, and I've also got a smaller tape. So I can run 20 meters down, 4 meters out, and I've also bought a little step ladder because the other thing, if you actually read into the Australian design rule, is that when you get out to the 4 meters, it should be at a plane, which is the median of the vehicle. So my assumption there is that it's sort of the halfway point through the vehicle, so you're looking at the horizontal plane. You don't necessarily need to be looking straight down onto the road behind you. So say if I put this witch's hat just down over there, you don't necessarily need to be looking at that. So I'm actually going to plonk this on a 3-step ladder I brought along, and that'll give us that sort of horizontal plane just to test out and see what our field of view is from the different types of mirrors. Now in reality, this is something you can test at home because it's really, really easy, and you only need those few things that I've shown here. In reality, you probably don't even need the witch's hats or anything like that. You just need this measuring tape. I've actually pegged it down into the ground. It's just a simple case of running to the back of the caravan and marking the 20 meter point where I'll put the first witch's hat. And as you can see, 20 meters is a fair way back. Now we get our smaller tape, and I'm just going to measure out 4 meters. We'll probably just be on the road, I think. Not quite sure. We'll see how we go. And so this is the extremities of the field of vision, or the triangle that we need to maintain with our towing mirrors. So it's quite a big area that you'll see here. Now that's where the mirror type comes into play, because you've got different mirror types, flat and concave or convex, and I think that makes a fairly big difference as well. There's some pros and cons with that, but we'll run through them shortly. But that is essentially how you can measure it all out and do a little bit of a test at home to see how you fit in, how it's all going to work before you go and hit the road and find that your mirrors might necessarily work. So now we'll actually go and run through the different types of mirrors before we test all this out and see how it works. Now when it comes to mirror types, there's essentially 2 or 3 different types. You have your click-on style that we've got here. So these are our Milenco Grand Aero 4s. They're pretty much the mainstay that most people use as far as clip-on mirrors go. You then go all the way to the other end and get your replacement mirrors. So they're such things as your clearviews, your MSAs, and there's a few knockoffs now floating around such as your Sanhema and all those sort of style ones. Now, firstly, let's touch on the more expensive ones, and they are the full replacement mirrors. If you've got an older car, apart from availability, it's not such an issue. The problem with most modern cars is you've got indicators, you've got heated mirrors, you've got cameras. They're tilt and fold, so they fold themselves in and all that sort of finagle stuff. That all adds into the price. So with these premium vehicles that have pretty much everything on them, you're looking at upwards of $1,700 for a full set of adjustable towing mirrors. Now, my favorite is actually the MSA mirrors. The form factor, as you can see here, is actually really, really nice. They actually fold up so they're all nice and snug, and then you can actually rotate the assembly down as well as moving it out to actually suit a number of different towing styles. So say if you just want a little bit of extra visibility, you can just click it down and that moves the mirror a little bit out. If you need a lot of visibility, you can actually pull the whole mirror out because they're all on extensions. Clearview is obviously the other brand that's pretty popular in the space, and with the next gen ranges up until a few months ago, they were the only option. But the pricing is very, very similar between the two. The one big difference with the clearview mirrors is they have two different styles. Well, three in reality, because you've got the older style. You then have the next gen mirrors, which is what you see on pretty much most vehicles these days. They're a lot more compact and they're not so in your face, which is where the knockoffs come into place. The knockoffs are really based on the original clearview mirrors that had that huge, great big mirror assembly and the two wings that came out, pretty much just like this. Now the next gens are a little bit more discreet, they're a little bit more profiled, and they work pretty well. They are still quite bulky, however, and that's where my preference still lies with MSA. They just are a little bit slimmer and sleek. And that takes me into what I was talking about. So the next gen compacts is pretty much what you fit to most modern vehicles these days. And there's two different sizes. That comes through with a larger size that actually has a flat main mirror, and then a little smaller convex or concave mirror that sits down the bottom. Now, some people like that, some people don't like it. Most modern mirrors are convex in style now, so they obscure the view a little bit by providing that wider angle. If you put the flat mirror up against that, it throws a lot of people off, and it does take a little while to get used to it. Now, there is another model that actually removes the convex mirror, so you just have the flat. So that shrinks the mirror from the larger 279 high mirror down to 220, which I think actually looks quite good, particularly on the Rangers, Land Cruisers and all that sort of thing. The advantage of the flat mirror is when you're reversing, it's a lot more accurate. So you don't have that little sticker that says objects may appear closer in the mirror. That's a clear sign that you've got the convex mirror style, and it just makes it a lot more accurate, particularly when you're reversing. But in day-to-day driving down the road, you just need to get used to whatever mirror is there. But the cost is a big factor. So if you're not a full-time tower, or you're not regularly towing a caravan or a trailer or camp trailer or anything like that, it's a lot of money to outlay for, you know, your casual, every now and again, weekend trip away. And that is where the clip-on mirrors really come into play. But don't cheapen out, and there's no reason to cheapen out really. These Milenco mirrors, they are fantastic quality. They originate from Europe, and anyone that posts on a Facebook group asking for mirror recommendations, 99% of the time you'll be recommended the Milenco mirrors. They're really robust. I think they test them up to 250 kilometers an hour. So when you've got trucks flying past, I've never had a problem with these moving, shifting, or anything at all. They're fully adjustable, and the best thing about these is that you can actually transfer them from vehicle to vehicle. So we originally used these on our Pajero. When we bought the Ranger, they carried over and you simply bolt them on. You just need to make a few little adjustments, and then they're pretty much just plug and play. It's pretty rare that I adjust the mirrors while we're driving along. It would only be the one on the other side, which is due to those blind spots. They've got a really decent sized mirror. You can adjust it up and down. You can actually, with this rod, position it either way you want. You can turn it around so that they're out long ways or up and down like what I tend to use, and they work extremely well. If you go for the cheaper versions, noting that these are only $130, so they're pretty affordable in my view, you do have issues where they don't clip on properly, you lose them while you're driving down the road, or they fold in. Now, some people do say that they do have issues with putting these style mirrors onto standard mirrors, that they fold in while you're traveling down the road. I think with most modern vehicles, you don't have that issue. I think that's probably a consideration. However, for the most part, unless you've got a really old vehicle, the mirrors are fairly robust these days. You don't have to worry about it. But for $130, it's pretty hard to go past something like this. But that's where the Snap and Zap has come into play, because it's a hybrid between a clip-on mirror and a full mirror replacement, because it's that more integrated style. What I don't like about these is they sit on there, you've got all the rods and turn knobs and everything hanging off. If you're driving through a lot of insects and stuff like that, these just get covered and it's a bit of an ordeal to clean them. But I think the Snap and Zap, if you've got a vehicle that they're suited to, might work fairly well. So let me grab them. I want to show you what they're all about, how easy they clip on, and let's see how they go as a replacement for the Milencos on our particular next gen Ranger here. Now, this isn't a sponsored video. I paid for these and I'm really curious to try them out. So these are the new Snap and Zap mirrors you get from KSource. So when these were finally released at the end of last year, I jumped on them and purchased them. Now, the recommended retail for these, I think, is $295. I got them on special for $250 when they were first released. They didn't quite make it so I could do the video before Christmas, but I'm doing it now, and we've got a few trips coming up where I'll really test these out, assuming I can get the vision pretty much working with our particular journey caravan that we're towing around most of the time. Now, if we turn it around, it is actually a full body that clips on over your existing mirrors. The only problem at this point is that they don't make these mirrors for a huge amount of models. They are actually in development currently for the current generation Hilux, the MUX and the D-Max. And these, I believe, will also go onto not only your next gen Ranger, the Everest, but also the Volkswagen Amarok as well. So the Amarok must use the same mirror bodies, even though the shape is slightly different. So that's a pretty handy thing to know. So it's a full, really nice sort of profiled, very lightweight mirror shell that will clip on. If we turn it around, you've got your adjustable mirror here. So it's the same as everything else. You can adjust the mirror around to suit your vision needs. On the inside, if I adjust it so I don't actually flash the sun back into the camera, it's got some foam sort of covers so that you're not scratching up your mirror assembly, but really it is dead easy. All you do is you actually put it on, clip it onto the top of your mirror. It clips in underneath, and then I'll bring you around and show you. There's a little tab that actually clips onto the bottom of the mirror to hold it all into place. So it continues your blinker around and it gives that more integrated look. But if I just unclip these quickly, so this little tab here actually clips around the bottom lip of the mirror, and that's what holds it on. You simply slide them over the top of the mirror cap, and these two tabs here, they actually lock into this lip. So you put them on like that, and then the bottom of it actually slides, and it's got some holes and bits and pieces for your 360 camera to poke through. And then you simply just clip it on like so, and it is rock solid. It's pretty much an extension of the factory mirror. You can obviously adjust this mirror around to whatever you require, but remember, you can't adjust it out. Now, where I think these are a really good compromise over the clip-on mirrors and a full replacement mirror is obviously it retains all the hardware inside the factory mirror itself. So it saves a lot of money. Even though these mirrors are $300 and the ones they provide for the RAM, that are all sourced from the US, they're a little bit cheaper. Understand there's a fair bit of design and development that goes into actually producing these mirrors. So for me, $300 is a good hybrid compromise because I've still retained the use of the factory blind spot monitoring. It doesn't impact that at all. The 360-degree camera is still able to work from underneath. The indicators still work. You can still power fold them in, even though we don't tend to do that anyway. And I think it might be a really neat solution for those with newer vehicles, particularly as Owen and Snap Zap start developing them for the more medium-sized vehicles we use over here in Australia. So let's test these out because I'm really curious to see if we can get the vision triangle working with these real compact mirrors and how they actually compare to the Milencos, how I've got them set for pretty much every single trip that I do. And that might actually tell me that I need to run these, but actually extend them out a little bit further. But let's see how we go. So we'll just put our cone up onto my little step ladder I've got here. And the first test we're going to do is actually look down the side of the Caravan to see if we can see this witch's hat or safety cone at that medium height that I've set with my 3-step ladder. Now there's a little bit of trust that's going to go into this because I don't know how I'm going to get the camera directly in the right spot for my field of view, but really surprisingly, I can see that ladder really, really easily. And this is a difference that you can see here. See, if you're not running towing mirrors at all, you can see here, I can't actually see the ladder down this side. Now, hopefully, if you can see it here, by adding this extension on and adjusting it, we can see it really clearly here with no drama at all. I can also see across to that other witch's hat. So in theory, this field of vision is working incredibly well. The issue will be when we get to the other side, but let's quickly swap over to the Milenco mirror and I'll show you what the difference is there. Now these are the Milencos, put on pretty much as I run them as a standard sort of setup. Haven't adjusted them at all, and you can see the field of vision is pretty much the same. on these as they are with the Snap Zaps. The only big difference is you've got a much bigger area of mirror there when you compare them, and we can obviously shift this out if we need to. But in my seating position here, I'm sort of tucked right back so that you can see it. We can actually see that witch's hat with no drama at all, and we can see the one on the other side. So they both work incredibly well just as they are currently set up, which is a bit of a relief really, so I know I'm pretty much within the ballpark. But the big thing here is that I know I can run the Snap Zaps without too much of a compromise over the Milencos we've been running for many, many years. If you haven't already gathered, it's extremely hot today, so bear with me while I perspire a little bit while I'm sitting here in a really, really hot car. But I think this has been a really interesting experiment to show, in particular, these two compact style mirrors, and that you don't necessarily need to go and spend $1,500 to $1,700 on full replacement mirrors. I'd only recommend that if you're doing full-time touring, traveling, or you're using your caravan, your boat, or anything like that really, really regularly, or you just got a lot of money to spare. So I think these are still a really good value option, which is what this channel is all about. So what we'll do now is actually try to do the other side, which is pretty much setting up the same triangle. The light's around the other way, so I'm not sure if I'll reposition the vehicle so we've got better light, but getting a bit of shade will probably help me out right now because it is hot. So I've set up on this side as well. I was hoping that tree in the background would be right on the 4 meter mark, but it's just in a little bit, but we can use that as a bit of a test. I do think with the Snap Zaps that it'll be a little bit tricky with this cone here at least, but we've got it pretty much lined up with the back of the van, and it's just sort of dealing with the view from the driver's side across to the mirror, down past the awning stabilizers and bits and pieces, stuff like that. But otherwise, let's give it a crack and see how it looks. Now, just like before, we're actually going to start with the Snap Zaps just because they're already on. Then we'll swap over to the Milencos, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to show you on camera. So you're just going to have to take my word for it, but it's actually not too bad, to be honest. So I've pretty much got the camera where I would have my head if I was looking out the mirrors. I've had to do a little bit of adjustment, but I can actually see a little hint of orange safety cone there. So definitely that 1 meter mark is easy without too many dramas at all. And remember, this is all by a scientific diagram. When you're driving along, we're pretty close to that blind spot there. We've got no issues at all. If anything, you can sort of move your head across a little bit and pick it up anyway. But again, you can notice the difference between a standard mirror and then a mirror extension. You just get so much of a better view that you don't necessarily get. Now we'll quickly swap them over to the Milencos, and all you'll see there is that you'll have a much bigger field of view because it's a much larger mirror. But I'm actually quite impressed with this. It's working a lot better than what I originally or initially thought with these KSource Snap Zap mirrors. So what we'll do now is we'll swap these over to the Milencos and we'll see how they look, then we'll wrap this up. Right, and with the Milencos, it's actually interesting. It's a little bit harder to see the far cone, which I haven't put up on a stepladder at this point, but I can still see my little blind spot cone there up on the stepladder, which is a good thing. It's just, I think because this mirror is further forward, it actually makes the field of view a little bit worse than the Snap Zaps actually, so that is a really interesting thing. Now I could actually adjust these Milencos a little bit more just to make that work, but for this exercise that we're doing here, given I'm about to pull these off and fit the Snap Zaps back up, that actually worked okay. But I think if I adjusted this out just a little bit more, we'd be able to pick up that cone down at the far end without too many dramas at all. So this has been a really interesting experiment. A few surprises there as well, because I didn't expect both of these to perform nearly as well as what they did, but really at the end of the day, this is a fairly wide vehicle. Now, obviously the best thing when you're towing is to extend your mirrors out. The further you can get them out within a reasonable distance, the more you're going to be able to see. So obviously that's, as I've mentioned before, where the compromise comes with these. The Milencos, they actually stand out to around about 450 mil, and that's fairly similar to your clearviews and your MSA mirrors. They come out around about 350 mil from memory. And actually driving along with these mirrors on the way home, I'm actually quite impressed. The visibility is fine out of these. No dramas at all. So if people are interested in these KSource mirrors, I'll put a link in the description for these mirrors, as well as the Milencos, next gens, MSAs, all that sort of thing, just so that you've got a one-stop shop if you are hunting around for mirrors. The one thing I'll know with the Milencos, shop around as they're always on special. Anaconda at the moment has them for 130 bucks, as do a number of other retailers. But these KSource mirrors, I actually really like the form factor now they're on, and they're working really, really well. And so there you go. It's actually been really surprising how these little compact mirrors, straight off the side of your standard driving mirrors, work incredibly well. If you haven't already got some mirrors, I'd highly recommend it. Not only does that make you legal in most instances, it also greatly improves how you can see around your vehicle, especially when you need to overtake. Now, even though you're typically driving a little bit slower, just note that generally, in a lot of states, the maximum speed limit is 100 kilometers per hour. Even though the signpost might say 110 or something like that, a fair few states do say 100 kilometers if you are towing. Look that up in your particular state, as well as the requirements for towing mirrors. But even if you do have, as I said at the start, a camera on the back, that also helps greatly. Now, my methodology for driving along is that I like to always look way ahead, which my wife doesn't do a lot, I've discovered. I always like to look about 20 cars up to see what's going on. I keep a very good distance, so I've got a bit of a buffer in front of me. Even though people tend to pull into that, it's a safe thing to do. Now, from the back, it's quite often that you'll have a car sitting in behind your caravan or camp trailer and you can't see them. I think that's where the rear camera, if you've got it enabled, you've got a safety Dave or something like that, that allows you to see that there's a car in behind there. But I tend to always try to do a right-hand sweep so I can actually see right in behind me to make sure there's no one in there that's going to dart out. At the end of the day, as long as I give enough notice, put my blinkers on, I do have right of way to also merge out into the right-hand lane and overtake if I need to. But it's a really good habit to get into, looking in behind your van or your camp trailer while you're driving along before you go and dart out. Just in case someone's got the same idea. You don't know what drivers are doing these days. A lot of them are quite abrupt, and it just saves any accidents or any aggravation while you're driving down the road. Now, from the left-hand side, and that's where those blind spots come in, I always make sure I've got a really good distance down, and I've pretty much worked it out. We do a lot of towing and we know where the back of the van is in the case of the Journey, and the Swan's obviously shorter again. I have a mark that I sort of set somehow mentally that I just merge back into. We've traveled with friends and stuff like that. It's a real good safe distance, so you can just come back in, continue on your way, and everything's happy. We just had another jet fly over, so I'm going to wrap this up and go on to my next video. I'm going to add a few things in for the next coming video, which will be a little bit of feedback on our next gen Ranger. How's it going after 18 months? We've just done over 26,000 Ks and we're heading towards our 30K service, so I thought I'd do a bit of an update on that. So that'll be the next video that comes up. Sorry I've been a little bit slow with the videos. I've had a lot going on. I'm changing careers potentially and a lot of other things. We've had a death in the family over Christmas, and we've had some downtime, and we're just trying to get things sorted. So we're back into it now. It's February all of a sudden, so I'm trying to get a few videos done. This one I've had on my list for quite some time. We've got a little bit to do on the Journey, but the Swan is the main thing. I've got a few projects I want to wrap up on the Swan because I need to get rid of that so I can get started on my little compact camp trailer project, and that's something I'm really excited about. If you're new to the channel and you haven't already, please subscribe. Put a few comments down below if you've got a few other opinions or thoughts on towing mirrors, the legalities, compliance, all that sort of thing, because there's a bit of a grey space. There's a lot of opinion out there, but it's important to look at the legislation, and I've sort of tried to lay out what I've found in that. So I'm going to wrap this up so I can get going. It's getting pretty busy around here with planes coming in and out, and I do want to film a bit of a driving segment on my way back. So thank you all for watching, and as I always say, get out there, stay safe, have fun, and we'll catch you next time.